Hello, History Geeks. It's me, Miss Tarot, coming live from my dining room table. Happy April vacation. Hope everyone is relaxed and rested up. I also hope you've been doing your reading and catching up on your DBQ practice. Today's going to be our first edition of our Period 8 unit, and this looks at the United States from the time of 1945 to 1980. So in 1945, as we well know, the United States emerged from World War II as the world's largest and strongest economy. Americans, of course, were happy to get back to civilian life after technically, I guess, winning World War II and kind of coming out on top as the world's peacemaker and kind of the Boy Scout of the world, stepping in to join forces with the Allies and take out, the terrible Axis powers, including Hitler, Mussolini, etc. What no one could predict, however, was how the fall of colonial empires, the spread of communism, and changes in the global economy would impact American lives in the future. Americans enjoyed robust economic growth through the 1960s with little competition. The rest of the world economies were still recovering from the war. Essentially, we're the only positive or plus economy that's cooking during this time period, or that was super successful during the war. So obviously, when the war ends, we still end up being on top. Democrats enacted major domestic programs, sweeping reforms like Medicare, aid to education, civil rights for African American and women. This is also the time period of the civil rights movement in general, so we'll be talking about that. The Cold War against communism, communist governments dominated U.S. foreign policy. Like I said in class, when in doubt, always blame communism. America is on the alert for anything involving communist or communistic activity during this time period. The rise of communist empires, if you will, scares the bejesus out of America, and they believe really threatens our government and our way of life. So anything we can do to keep communism out and keep democracy in is what we're willing to do. Nuclear weapons kept the great powers from attacking each other. We also see during this time period hot wars in Korea and Vietnam, and combined, those two wars cost America more than 100,000 lives. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get into the ins and outs of both the Korean conflict and the Vietnam War. Hopefully you're doing your reading and you will see the devastation that those wars caused, foreign and domestic devastation. By the late 1860s, frustration over the Vietnam conflict, the opposition to liberal domestic programs such as the Civil Rights Movement, and increased civil unrest weakened the Democratic majority and, of course, gives way to a conservative resurgence in the 1980s. So after years and years and years of the Democrats essentially doing whatever it is that they want to do, people get tired of it, and now they want a little bit more conservative approach to government. And this is the same thing that still happens today. We'll get a couple stretches of Democratic presidents, and people get sick of it. Then we'll get a couple stretches of Republican presidents, and then people get sick of that. So it's really a lose-lose or win-win, depending on what side of the aisle that you're on. It's just the way government and politics go, up and down, up and down, up and down. Key concepts for you to keep in mind throughout period 8 is, number one, the U.S. responded to uncertain and unstable post-war world by asserting and attempting to defend a position of global leadership with far-reaching domestic and international consequences. Liberalism, number two, liberalism based on anti-communism abroad and a firm belief of the efficiency of governmental and especially federal power to achieve social goals at home reached its apex in the 1960s. And lastly, post-war economic, demographic, and technological changes had far-reaching impact on American society, politics, and the environment. So let's start with Truman and the Cold War, 1945 to 1952. Here's a great quote from President Harry S. Truman. Communism holds that the world is so deeply divided into opposing classes that war is inevitable. Democracy holds that free nations can settle differences justly and maintain lasting peace. This comes straight out of President Truman's inaugural address, which happens on January 20th, 1949. So, a little insight into post war America. World War II dramatically changed the U.S. from an isolationist country into a military superpower, followed by becoming a leader in world affairs. Remember, in World War I, we wanted to stay neutral for as long as possible. Then we ended up getting involved in that. In World War II, we saw what was happening. We wanted to just kind of not ignore it, but we wanted them to handle their problems and not step in unless it was absolutely dire, urgent need, which essentially is is what we end up doing. And because we did that, we come out on top, and then as a result, everybody is going to look to us as a world leader following the war. After the war, most Americans at home and the millions coming back from military service wish to return essentially to normal domestic life and enjoy the revitalized national economy. However, during the Truman presidency, there was a growing conflict between the communist Soviet Union and the United States, and we call this conflict the Cold War. And this really dampened the nation's enjoyment of the post-war boom. Should have been kind of a fun time to get back to regular, quote-unquote, regular life and the baby boom and all this good stuff, but the Cold War is kind of this dark cloud that is over the United States and looming and really making some people uncomfortable. What if communists comes here? What if we already have communists here? What if communism takes over? So it does kind of become a frenzy. 15 million soldiers, sailors, and Marines, of course, returned to civilian life between 45 and 46. After the war is over, they muster out, they come back home, and of course, they're going to find a bit of a hard time. They're going to have finding jobs and, of course, finding housing. Since the war years had increased the per capita income of Americans, however, life was pretty good. And if they could find jobs, they were lucky, and they did that. Women, of course, were asked to give up their Rosie the Riveter type gigs and go back to being in the homes, which was very difficult for them to do because they enjoyed getting, having that freedom and that opportunity to be outside of the home. And many African Americans who had also stepped up and filled jobs on the home front were also asked to give up their jobs to the white folks coming back. Which again is dehumanizing, and they're not very excited about it. So they're also going to need to find something to do. The upside, in the 1950s, America enjoyed an era of unprecedented growth and prosperity during this time period. So it is an uptick for some parts of the population. The GI Bill of Rights passed in 1944, and this, of course, proves really helpful to help the transition of 15 million vets into a peacetime economy. This meant that they could go to school almost totally free. My grandfather, who was a World War II vet, used his GI Bill to go to college and absolutely benefited from that. Yes, so my grandfather was a proud recipient of the GI Bill since he was a World War II veteran, went to college, got his degree in education, and spent the rest of his life being a principal, actually. So the GI Bill served him very well. As a result of the GI Bill, over 2 million GIs got to attend college. They received over $16 billion in low interest government-backed loans, and they were also able to buy homes and farms and start businesses. So really great opportunity for GIs returning home. Believe it or not, one sign of confidence in the post-war era, of course, was the expansion or the explosion of marriages as well as births, otherwise known as the baby boom. Younger marriages and births resulted in 50 million babies entering the population between 1945 and 1960. 50 million babies. That means your boyfriend, your husband, your brother, whoever made it back home from the war, and they celebrated in style. And then 9 months later, all the babies showed up. So baby booms also are a great indication that your society and economy are stable because you feel good enough or confident enough, or you have a little bit of income that you can actually afford the babies. All these babies grow up and eventually profoundly affect the nation's social institutions and economic life in the last half of the 20th century. So, as a result of the baby boom and all the babies happening, there's also high demand for housing after the war, which of course also results in a construction boom. Mass-produced homes become a thing. Levittown, New York, is kind of an example of this new found construction. Strip housing, basically, is what it's called. They mass produce 17,000 homes. They make the homes affordable for families to purchase and start a life. And this is also a time where we see a lot of people move out of the cities. The cities start to become less congested, and people move out to the suburbs. In the 1960s, however, we also start to see places like LA and Boston become increasingly poor and also racially divided. So there's a lot going on during this time period. Lots of positives, lots of negatives. Which is an interesting time period all around. The Sun Belt. So we also see the time in American history where people are moving away from the typically overpopulated, popular places. So now we're going to start to see people move into what is called the Sun Belt. Warmer climates, lower taxes, economic opportunities, mostly in defense-related industries, and this helps to attract GIs and their family. And the Sun Belt is typically located from Florida across the lower southern part of the United States into California. So we're going to see a lot of movement out of these congested cities. So like in period 7, when all this we talked about was the industrialization and all these cities growing so rapidly and the slums and the this and the that, we're going to start to see these cities become less populated, and we're going to start to see the growth of suburbs and kind of different lifestyles also emerge from this point on. Also, kind of the end of an era during period 8 is that in April of 1945, FDR passes away. He dies, and this is when Harry Truman, who is the Democratic senator from Missouri, takes over. Okay, so that's our first conversation about period 8. Come back soon and you'll see some more. We'll start our next conversation will be about our economic programs and the civil rights movement during this time period. Have a great day. See you later. Bye.